You are looking to set up your DJI Ronin-SC? Yes? Then this is the perfect video for you. The first thing that you need to do is to make sure that you have all the parts to set it up. The gimbal, the built-in battery grip, and I hope you're not silly like I am to forget to charge the battery grip. For that, you will need to attach the battery grip to the gimbal. The next item you need to have is a tripod, the quick release plate, a screwdriver, or you will do also just fine with a coin too, the control cable, which is not mandatory, and let's not forget the obvious, you will need a camera body. The one that I have here in my hand is the Fujifilm X-T3. You would also need a lens. You can use a prime or a zoom lens, either option are okay. What you have to be careful of is that the combination of your camera and your lens, and obviously all the accessory that goes on top of it, doesn't exceed 2 kg. Okay, the first thing we're gonna do together is to set up the gimbal. Take the tripod and attach it to the battery grip. You wouldn't want your camera to fall down on the ground, right? So make sure that it is attached tightly. Once done, open the 3 legs of the tripod and put it on a flat surface. Next, take your gimbal and make sure that it is unlocked. Slide the gimbal on the battery grip and lock the two of them by sliding this lever. By now, you should have your gimbal fully assembled. The next step, you will have to mount the camera on the gimbal. To do so, we have to put the mounting plate on the camera body. If you look at the back of the mounting plate, you will see some indicators: heavy, light, and lens. So what you have to do with a simple setup like this is to put the heavy indicator where you can mount it on the camera. As for the lens indicator, it should go under the lens. If you have a setup with a much bigger lens like this one, the lens may be touching the mounting plate or may not even fit. In that case, you will have to use the camera riser and the lens support that comes in the box. The camera riser will add a little bit of space for the lens in between the camera body and the mounting plate, whereas the lens support is there in order to stabilize the bigger size of the lens. This is what you should have by now. Also, you have to make sure that your battery is fully charged and inside your camera. Then, put your lens. Once you have finished assembling your camera and your lens and the mounting plate, just make sure that if you need any accessory on top of your camera, to have it mounted beforehand. So for example, if you want to put a filter or a microphone, just make sure that you have it in place in order to not mess up the balancing later on. Okay, once you're ready with all this, we will now put the camera on the gimbal. The first thing I like to do is to lock the 3 axes in the same position as you would in a normal position of shooting. If you don't know what the 3 axes are, these are the one: tilt, roll, and pan as shown on the screen. Make sure that you remember these 3 because they will be useful to you when you will be balancing your camera and the gimbal, but also when you are doing the balancing test. Let me show you from my point of view what you would need to do. So first, unlock the pan axis and rotate the roll arm toward you. Then you would need to rotate the gimbal anti-clockwise, unlock the roll arm and lift the roll arm to this angle like this and lock it again. Finally, you will have to unlock the tilt arm, put it parallel to the floor and lock it again. So this is what you should have after locking the 3 axes. I hope this was not too difficult for you, especially since these 3 locks have a predetermined set of positions. Alright, now that this is done, let me show you how I mount my beloved X-T3 on the DJI Ronin-SC. So the first thing that you have to do is to loosen the knob under the tilt arm right here. And don't loosen it too much, otherwise it will fall like the silly me. Once the knob is loose enough, and not too loose of course, then you can put the camera plate right here. Then tighten the knob back. Now is your last chance to do all the final adjustments that you want to do on your camera. So if for example you want to tilt your screen upward, do it now. If you want to change the focal length on your lens, do it now. If you want to add an ND filter, a UV filter or any kind of filter, do it now. If you want to add any kind of accessory on your camera body or your lens, do it now. And finally, if you want to use the control cable, this is the time to do it. You will have to be careful on the orientation of the cable. You have to put the L-shaped end of the cable on the gimbal. This is to prevent the cable to block the 3 arms of the gimbal. Let me show you how it would look like if you do it the other way with the L shape on the camera. So if you look in between the roll arm and the camera, the cable will come in between just like here. Based on my experience, this will come in between during the balancing and when you are using the gimbal. Now, at this stage, everything should be mounted. We will now move on to the balancing part. In this part, there are 3 things that we need to balance: the tilt, the roll and the pan. And I hope that by now you have by hearted where they are. The first thing you will have to do is to unlock the tilt arm. Now that it is unlocked, we will have to check whether it is balanced correctly on this arm or not. So what you will have to do is to put the camera horizontally like this and to make sure that it is not tilting forward or backward. As you can see here, when I don't hold it anymore, it is tilting toward the camera body, which means that this side is heavier. So what you are going to do now is to loosen the knob underneath the release plate so that we can move the camera forward. You will have to do this until you find the middle point when the camera doesn't tilt forward or backward when you don't hold it. Once you have found the sweet spot, tighten the knob again and make sure that it is correctly balanced. On my first try, it's almost balanced. It's not too bad, but it's not perfect. It is still tilting slightly toward the back. But for the sake of the video and not wasting your time, let's move on. We are not done with balancing the tilt arm yet. What you will have to do is 2 more tests. One, which is testing the balancing of the camera at 45 degrees, and one more at 90 degrees. I just did the 2 tests and it is quite well balanced at those 2 angles already. So let me just change it so I can show you how it looks like when it is unbalanced. If you see here, when I put the camera at the 45 degrees, it goes back to being horizontal. So this is not correct. You will have to readjust the second knob on the side of the tilt arm. And you will have to do this until the camera doesn't move at the 2 angles that I have said, 45 degrees and 90 degrees. If the camera body is tilting forward toward the lens, what you have to do is to move the camera upward. However, if it is tilting backward, what you have to do is to move the camera downward. So since it is moving forward, I will now put my camera upward. Like I said, do this until it is balanced at 45 degrees and 90 degrees. Once done, this is what you should have. Your camera shouldn't be moving forward or backward at those 2 angles. Take your time and slowly redo it if it is not correctly balanced. This is quite important as it will affect the quality of your footage afterward. Once you are happy with it, on the release plate there is a black knob that you can use. It is quite small but very useful. What you can do is to save the position of your camera on the first knob that we have touched. With all this, we are done with the balancing of the tilt arm. But don't forget, we have 2 more arms to do. And the next one is the roll arm. Same as the first arm, what you're going to do is to unlock the lock for the roll arm. After this, you may see your camera swing to the left or to the right, but that's normal and that's fine, don't worry. What we need to do is to balance it correctly. To do that, you need to again unlock the knob under the release plate, and this will allow the camera and the release plate to move to the left or to the right. So same as before, you need to find a sweet spot so that the camera doesn't swing to the left or to the right, and then you're done. With this, we are done with the tilt and the roll arm. Before we move on to the pan axis, what I would recommend is to do a final check of all the balancing we have done so far. So if you have followed my instructions so far, your balancing should be quite good. You can test this out without switching on the gimbal by moving the gimbal and the camera to the left or to the right, upward or downward, forward or backward, and your camera should stay quite still. With this, we can now move on to the last axis, the pan axis. By now, you should know what is the first thing you need to do without me telling you. Unlock the pan axis. So the way to test the pan axis is to tilt the camera on one side or the other and to make sure that the pan axis doesn't go haywire. If you see here, when I tilt the gimbal on the left, the pan axis does the full 180 degrees. What you should have is a camera that doesn't move at all or barely moves at all. In order to balance this axis, you will have to loosen this knob and same as before, find a sweet spot to balance it out. And voila, this is what you should have when you balance the pan axis. As you can see here, the camera barely moves when I tilt the camera on the right side. And with this, congratulations, you can now switch on your gimbal. Press and hold the power button for a few seconds, you will have a beeping sound, and that means the gimbal is starting up. Now that we are done mounting the gimbal, you can now go and play with your gimbal and make all those cinematic video or short film or B-rolls. Wait, don't leave so fast. Before we part ways, there is one more thing that you need to do, which is to subscribe to my channel. No, seriously, there's one more thing that you need to do, which is to test the balancing of the gimbal through the mobile application of the DJI Ronin-SC. Do you remember at the beginning of the video when I said you need to charge your gimbal before doing this? Well, I did not do it. So we will finish this video while having the gimbal charged at the same time. It is not something that I recommend, but let's do it. The first thing you need to do is to open the Ronin mobile app. Then we need to connect the Ronin mobile app to the gimbal. So you have to make sure that the gimbal is switched on before you do this. After that, you will see on the homepage that there's an option called Balance Test. You need to click on that. On your screen, you will see that it says that you have to hold the gimbal slanted at an angle of more than 15 degrees. The good thing about the app is that it will show you live how much inclined it is. And finally, you need to press on Begin Test and let it run for a few minutes. You will see that your camera, oops, I moved the gimbal too much, now it is not inclined enough. Let me start again. I was about to say just now that during the test, the gimbal will be moving on its own a few times, and this is perfectly normal. The gimbal is trying to test the balancing that you have just done. And finally, if you have followed all the instructions that I have given you so far, and if you have by heart the 3 axes, then this is the result that you will get. Well, I am finally done. I hope you enjoyed this guide on how to set up the DJI Ronin-SC. You can now like and subscribe, and now we can part ways. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.